20 Years by O. Henry. And I really kind of like the way that he started off the story. And it goes like this. The cop moved along the street, looking strong and important. This was the way he always moved. He was not thinking of how he looked. There were few people on the street to see him. It was only about 10 o'clock at night, but it was cold, and there was wind and a little rain in it. He stopped at doors as he walked along, trying each door to be sure that it was closed for the night. Now and then he turned and looked up and down the street. He was a fine-looking cop, watchful, guarding the police. People in this part of the city went home early. Now and then you might see lights of a shop or of a small restaurant, but most of the doors belonged to businesses, places that had been closed hours ago. So he tries to set the scene of the policeman's beat, his nightly walk that he's assigned. And the story was written in 1906. So at the time, New York City had a population of about 2 million people. So today it's over 10 million. The neighborhoods or the boroughs, they're called boroughs in New York. It's from a Dutch phrase. There were only three. And you have your city, but there's like a sharp contrasting line that's drawn. City, streets, buildings, bam, you're in the middle of farmland. It was that clear cut uh, geography. There were no suburbs like we know today. So try to put the picture together of 1906 in New York. There were uh, established police force by that time. They modeled themselves after the police in London, a municipal police force. So why are policemen called cops? So in London, the policemen eventually had uniforms, and as part of the uniform, they had a badge that they would wear that said, London Police, Metropolitan Police. But the badge was made of copper, so that's how the nickname cops evolved to today. And here again, I mean, this story was written 120 years ago, and we're still using phrases that are that old in our vocabulary today. Okay, so like I say, there's about 2 million people, a lot smaller than the New York City of today. A lot of trees and parks. There were trees along the sidewalks. Um, there were the beginnings of gangs, mostly Irish and German. They were the immigrants of the day. The there were there was electricity. They had electric lights. There were telephones. Not everybody had one, but there were telephones. And the streets had automobiles. Those old, clunky, old automobiles. Some of them were actually electric. Um, and it was becoming a problem. Cars were becoming a problem. Of course, not everybody had cars. It was only the kind of rich and famous that could afford them. Excuse me. They were out of the price range of the usual everyday person. And so um, the uh, there were no traffic lights. There were no traffic stops. Um, the police did not have cars. They did have motorcycles. Um, the first fatality connected to an automobile was maybe 1905. Some man was stepping off a trolley car and got hit by an automobile. Cars could only go about 20 miles an hour, maybe. But um, they were weaving in and out of horse-drawn carriages and trolley cars and people walking across the street. There were no pedestrian crossings. I mean, it was just a complete madhouse. A couple of years after the story is written, the police finally do get a car, mostly for the police commissioner. Uh, okay, so that kind of sets the scene here. It's more of a friendly neighborhood policeman type of thing. Um, as described in the beginning of the story, we see that the policeman is checking the doors to make sure they're locked on the businesses. And if they saw a light on uh, in one of these office buildings, they'd call the owner and say, "Hey, what's going on? You got a light on upstairs. Maybe we should go check it out." So that's basically the scene that we're opening up with in after 20 years with O. Henry. Okay, so some of the themes in this story, of course, the most obvious is friendship between Bob and Jimmy Wells. But another possible lesson could be duty versus relation. Now, Jimmy Wells and Bob had been friends for many years, grew up together. Uh, does Jimmy turn his friend in to be arrested? It's a personal moral dilemma that he must make a decision on. And again, in the end of the story, we see that duty triumphs over friendship. Another lesson might be is that Bob has become an habitual criminal. So our story starts off. Jimmy Wells and Bob are at a restaurant. They're young, starting out in their adult life. Uh, Bob is going out west to seek his fame and fortune. Jimmy loves New York City. He doesn't want to leave. He's going to stay there. He uh, tells Bob that he works for the city, which is true. He doesn't really go into details. Okay, but um, Bob is has become a criminal out west as a way to make his fortune. And even though out west at the time was a series of little small towns, people knew each other. You're a stranger coming into town. People want to know where you came from, what you did. Word gets passed around town to town. Now we've got, some criminal elements moving around, and so people are suspicious. Bob has to move from town to town to kind of keep his past from being recognized. So it's not an easy life. I guess you could probably say that Bob is kind of living the life like a Bonnie and Clyde type of existence, having to steal and rob to pay for groceries and housing and travel, and it just compounds itself over time, and there's no escape. So the two young boys uh, at the beginning of our story promise that in 20 years' time they will meet again at the restaurant and share their life experience. So Bob shows up, and the restaurant that they were meeting in 20 years ago had become a hardware store. And we don't know it at the time, but Jimmy Wells is the policeman that is introduced in the story, and he's there on time too. But Bob doesn't recognize him. But Jimmy Wells recognizes Bob from wanted posters, and they had been tipped off by the Chicago Police Department that Bob was going to be in town and keep an eye out for him. So the dilemma of duty versus relation for Jimmy Wells is kind of out of his hands at this time. Not only he, but others in the police department knew that Jimmy Wells was going to be in town. So it'd be kind of hard for him to let his friend go to give him a pass. And so he's kind of really stuck with having to arrest him. And we don't really get the full story of Bob and his past until kind of the end, until kind of the end of the story. So I kind of like this really short, quick story of O. Henry's. Um, it it's the moral lesson is that we should perform our duty with full honesty and sincerity, as difficult as it can be in certain times. So that's our story after 20 years by O. Henry.